Welcome back. We are running towards the end of the event. Two more very exciting presentations to come. And before I introduce Jan and Herman, I saw two questions in the Q&A box. One was, will the slides be made available? We'll look into that, but at least the recordings will be made available. So you'll have the chance to look at the details in the recording. But I think there will be a way in making the slides available as well as some kind of PDF. That was one question. The other one was about the content of Skills Academy. Is there any plan to expand content beyond Microsoft content? And yes, actually there is, and we're also already in the process, because there is so much good content available which is connected to the Microsoft content, all kinds of developer tools, etc. And we are looking into a way how we are going to add that to the Skills Academy. And indeed, it's true, customers do not always want an extra portal, because that was the remark. Sometimes they want one central hub with multiple types of content. So that's what we are working on, and that's part of our strategy for the next fiscal. But now to the cloud adoption. It's not skilling only. If you want to drive your business, if you want to bring your business to the cloud, you have a lot of things to think about. And Jan Depping and Herman Keizer, Partner Technology Strategist and Partner Development Manager, if I remember it correctly. They're both stated as Partner Development Manager, but what's in a name? Technical guys who can, more or less, I think, who can tell you more about what to think about when you bring your business to the cloud. Great to have you guys. You wrote a book about these 8 cloud principles, and I think the viewers are very eager to learn more about what you've written in that book. And I'm certain that you're also going to share where people can find more details about the book, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, the floor is yours, and have fun.
Welcome by the principal session. Herman and I wrote a book. My name is Jan Depping. I work for 14 years now at Microsoft, mostly in technical roles, technical, strategic. And this is my colleague Herman.
Herman Keizer, also almost 7 years at Microsoft, and I'm currently leading in Western Europe the data center migration motion.
So, why principles? What we figured out was that moving to the cloud can sometimes be confusing and sometimes be complex. And we thought about what kind of tools can we use to make that more sustainable and more predictable. And that's why we came up with principles. We started by calling them leading principles, but what it basically is, you have a purpose as an organization, that's why you're on this planet, and then you have all kinds of principles, and those principles lead you to your goals. And by checking those principles, when you make choices, when you have to make difficult discussions, those principles keep you on track. The most important thing is these principles are not a one-time task. You don't make up principles and then say, this is my set of principles for the rest of my life. Principles are changing. Just like cloud is changing, just like Azure is changing, principles are also changing. So, and then the principles are basically wrapping around the whole people, process and technology era. And it's important to understand that, and it's important to have principles in place that influence all these different kinds of topics in your organization. So it is about people, process and tech. But one important thing is, in this session, we mainly will focus on tech. We will sometimes explain what the impact is on people and what the impact is on process, but we have tech examples. So, and by example, for instance, the impact on processes, if you do something with performance and capacity management, so you plan when you need new hardware to fulfill the performance needs in the future, and you do it in the old-fashioned way in a data center, you need to be really proactive. You need to buy hardware, you need to install hardware, you need to configure hardware, you need to make the hardware some kind compliant with all your regulations. That takes up a whole lot of time. When you do this same process in the cloud, it is just about auto-scaling. So this process is different from a process on-premise. So, like I said, we will talk about tech concerning to the principles, but there is more than tech. So we defined 8 of them, and these 8, again, this is not a complete list. You can add things to it, you can remove things from it, but we were talking about build to change, build to fail. We talk about self-service, we talk about freedom of choice, we talk about trusted, we talk about continuous change, software-defined, pay-per-use, and scalable. And let's start with the first one. Let's start with build to fail. When we talk about build to fail, what we are saying is, if you build something in the cloud, and if you're a customer and your partner builds something in the cloud, then have in mind that things go wrong. And if you have in mind that things go wrong, it is not a problem that things go wrong, because you'll be prepared. So Herman, can you explain something more about that?
Yes, thank you. Very important to remember, that is also a famous quote that everybody sometimes hears, that is, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. People tend to, when they are moving into the cloud, they say the network that is always reliable, there is now something as latency doesn't exist anymore, the bandwidth is innovative, so there is all kinds of things that people think, hey, when I go to the cloud, those restrictions that I have today in my on-premise environment doesn't exist anymore into the cloud. Hey, let's cut the crap. Even in the cloud world, these things still exist. And very important, if you think in mind build to fail is not something that will happen. Build to fail is a functionality you incorporate into your environment. So if you put that into your mind and put into your design, then your environment is, say, build to fail proof. And that is not something that comes automatically. There are things you need to work with in your platform. And very important that if you do that in your design, there are several examples. And I will point out it's just an example. There are several other ways within Microsoft and within Azure to do these things, build to fail. But one of the examples I like to point out is here, if you're looking from a virtual machine perspective, you can say, wait a minute, looking at your SLA requirements, we call them the blast radius, what you are thinking about. I can start with just with a single VM, and when that single VM goes down, hey, then the service is unavailable. I can even go bigger, then I can build an availability set, or I can even bigger, build availability zones, or even go far beyond that to create region pairs so that you can do failover across Azure regions. So there are several ways to go there. On the deck where we are showing here, there is a link where we go more in details in those, where you can find more information. As we pointed out, is just one of the examples we are pointing here, what can be done if you're looking at build to fail in your mind.
And then number two is self-service. And self-service is a really important thing of cloud. So what you do, if you can automate it, you automate things. You don't do things by hand. And that means that if you do it, if you have automated it, you are guaranteed about the way things work. You can do self-service from 2 perspectives. You can do it from the perspective of management, or you can do it from the perspective of delivery. Management is how you provide services to a customer. But if you're a customer, and I'm talking to customers right now, then it's about delivery. It's the ability for you to take a service from a partner or a service provider and implement it yourself and manage it yourself. So 2 areas of expertise, management and delivery. Herman?
Yeah. If you look at an example, more from a technical point of view, what is today, for instance, available, if I go to a virtual machine in the Azure, there are on several layers where you can do already self-service. There is self-service, what you can do purely on the deployment part, when I can use the ARM template and just deploy the environment. But also on the monitoring part, I can pull all kinds of information already out of the platform, or even go even deeper down, for instance, using the serial console and even still get, say, console access to my environment. And the nice thing is everything what we now show here as an example from what is in the portal available is also available through API. So you can incorporate these things again in your application. So if you're building self-service for your application, but on the lower end is using these functionality, you can incorporate those APIs. But you can also look self-service from a complete different point of view if you go to the marketplace within Azure. So I don't want to build the environment all by myself. I can go and pick and choose already pre-built environment that is already available in the marketplace. There's just examples what we've been talking about self-service, how you can bring that. But the applications you are going to design and build, they can also be in the future part of this marketplace. So also that can be a possibility.
So then number 3, freedom of choice. And also this is a big one. So you can do things in cloud. You can do it with Microsoft stuff, but you can also do it with open source stuff. You can also manage things from Azure that is running, for instance, in the cloud of Google or in Amazon. So freedom of choice is a big thing. That is what our customers want, and that is what we deliver. But it comes with a price, because it is still a bit complex. So you need to think, what do I need? What do I want for what kind of specific task?
Yep.
Herman?
Now for that, we're within the Azure portal, if you're going to the Azure Docs environment, we already have several decision trees. This is very important for yourself if you want to have that freedom of choice. Ask your own question, why? Why do I need it, and what are the outcomes I really want? There is not, say, a solution that everything should be in a virtual machine. Like this diagram shows, there are several ways. It could be an Azure base, it could be a common Azure function, it could even become a container, whatever. The URL is also on this deck. But it's also very important, the why question. So if the why question is a starting point, I want to do a hosting model, then there are several set of criteria I can ask myself. And these are just standard criteria that are already available for you on the Azure Doc site, where you can say pick and choose already and help you guide through which solution fits best your need. But the why question can not only be hosting, but it can also be on the DevOps environment. So I want to build certain stuff on Azure, but I got certain criteria, and basing on those criteria, I need a virtual machine, or I need an app service, or I need a service fabric, etc., etc. But it can also purely be on scalability. So if I ask questions by myself about scalability, based on those questions, depends on what type of workloads I'm really going to use.
And what you see on this principle, because this principle is complex and you have so many choices, we see sub-principles. So sometimes we see a customer or a partner has a principle, we do serverless unless, or we do cloud, public cloud unless, to make this more simple. So that's where you can define your own principles based on this one. Number 4, trusted. For me, this is one of the most important ones, and I think they're all important, but this is one of the most important ones, and that is trust. There is a verb I like really much, and that is the verb that every creation in life is created twice. Once in the mind and once in the physical world. And the change from the mind to the physical world, that's based on trust. If we don't trust the physical world, and we don't have a clear view what will happen if we go to the physical world, we don't change. We stay safe and we do whatever we did before, because we know the outcome already. So trust is a really important thing. Trust in cloud is also really important. So from a cloud party, we need to figure out what to do with trust. And what we do is, and we call it the shared responsibility model. And we said, okay, you have several ways of delivering cloud services. You can do it on-prem. You can deliver on-prem cloud services. You can deliver infrastructure as a service. You can deliver platform as a service, or you can deliver software as a service. And then the shared responsibility thing kicks in. So from the top, information, data, and access. That is always the responsibility of the customer. That's never our responsibility. We also give you the tools to create that kind of trust around that responsibility. And in the middle, I just take one, for instance, network controls and applications. There comes the sharing along. And then you see that there is responsibility from the end customer, but there's also responsibility from us. And on the lower level, physical host, physical network, physical data center, that's basically the responsibility of Microsoft. So that's not something you have to concern about. We share the information with you, what we do, why we do it. We share it. We can also prove that we do it, so that we can do it in a compliant way. But this is the shared responsibility model. And then you need, of course, you need tools. So where can you find all that information? So this slide, I don't run through all the information on the slide, but I strongly advise you, look at the Trust Center. The Trust Center, there's all the information about what we do and why we do it and how we do it. Then there is the security portal. It can measure how things are going in your infrastructure and what you need to change. It's also a way to stay trustworthy. And last but not least, we got all kinds of information around privacy and security. So when you, for instance, want to be GDPR compliant, then again, that's also not our responsibility. That's the responsibility of the customer. If you want to be GDPR compliant, we got all kinds of tools to help you to become a compliant party. Number 5, continuous change. Continuous change has has a big influence on everything we do within Microsoft. We have at least 1,000 changes each month on all the services we deliver. So continuous change is a complex and hairy beast, like we like to say. There's also that has a big impact on people. And although we have a focus on tech right now, but this is one everybody can relate to. If you have continuous change, you need to have continuous learning. And continuous learning, if you start with continuous learning for the first time in your life, that's also quite frightening, because you need to learn things you never thought of. But there's also a tech-related thing.
Thanks, Jan. And it is not only tech-related. We see it today. We are now in a changing world and adapting to the 1.5 meter society. So we are also adapting and changing to this world. And that's also one of the basic layers of it, talking about continuous change. You start learning, you're monitoring things, you build your new release on these things, then you're going to deploy, then you start learning and do the release again. And so that is also, this continuous change is intertwined to all the other principles we already have. So we don't only talk about the DevOps, we also talk about the SysOps, the NetOps, the SecOps, the DataOps and the AIOps, or what we call XOps, because everything is intertwined within doing a continuous change mode.
Yeah, and the most important thing on this slide is it is data-driven. Dus if you build a continuous change platform and you build continuous change processes, make sure that those processes and those technologies and those continuous learning stuff, that is based on data, on insights, on data. It's not on a Fingerspitzengefühl, but it is on data. Number 6, software-defined. All these things, continuous change, self-service, all these things are not possible if it weren't for software-defined infrastructure. Everything we do is software-defined. In the end, there is hardware, of course, but one layer above the hardware, there is one abstraction layer. It's called the ARM layer, and that is all about software-defined. This makes all the other things possible. Herman.
Yeah, software-defined, we're talking then also about automation, building the scripting, and the automation can be done on the infrastructure as a service layer. That can also be done on the platform as a service layer. But also Jan pointed out, this is very much intertwined with our principles of number 5. This is very important where we then talk about, if we're talking about the continuous change, talking about the self-care, about trusted, etc., then we're talking about infrastructure as a code, because your platform you are running, you are using templates. Those templates we call within Azure the ARM templates, and those ARM templates is infrastructure. So when you build the environment using your ARM template, that is infrastructure as a code. You are changing those ARM templates, really building the new release, you are using infrastructure as a code. So there's also the whole structure of continuous change is part of the infrastructure as a code. Now, as an example, what I've just pointed out is the ARM template. That is the lower layer within the Azure platform. Through that ARM template, you're talking throughout the virtual machines, but also against all the other services. And those ARM templates are just APIs. So even again, if you're talking about in the beginning building that self-service platform, you need an API to talk to. Again, under the hood, you're talking to these environments. So there's also the intertwine between all those principles is the basic layer we're talking about software-defined.
And based on this is also the continuous learning. So if you do software-defined, that means that every guy or girl who manages infrastructure right now has to build up a muscle of development. You need to know some basic development skills to build your scripts. So this is also related to continuous learning. Number 7, pay-per-use. A pay-per-use, it sounds like a really fair way of doing things. You use stuff, and if you use it and you're satisfied, you pay for it. But it comes with a price. Sometimes it's really complex because we cannot predict the bill because it depends on how you use it. And for some customers, that is really complex. For some partners, it's really complex to build a business model on top of that because they don't know how to explain it to a customer. So this is a really good thing, but it's not an easy thing. So you need to think about pay-per-use. If you buy services from a managed service party, from a ISV, for instance, from a software vendor, figure out how the pay-per-use model works and how it works for you. The biggest thing in this whole story of pay-per-use is the discussion about value. If we only talk about the price and we don't talk about the value, we're missing the point. So everybody needs to learn to talk about value and not about the price, and value through the eyes of the customer. to the one who uses the service.
Yeah. So if you're talking about that pay-per-use, it's really come down from the resources you are using. So it's very important. If you just put the resource, you put it on, and you don't do anything with it, then you will pay a high price for that. So if you're still looking in the old ways, where you say, I go to my data center, turn the machine on, and when I don't need it anymore, I will turn it off after 3 or 4 years. That is not the way you're working within the cloud. So you're using machines when you need it. If you don't need it, you turn it off. So if you're looking at the right sizing of your workloads, you need to know what is those workloads doing. So if those dev test machines or those other machines are not needed at night, why leave them on? So turn them off. Other things, if you know in which time frame certain machines need to grow, then you can schedule those things. So you don't need to grow machines when they are not needed. It's the same when you know when they are predictable bursting in that environment. But there's some other things important on this slide there, yeah.
Yeah, the most important thing is that we did some research, and in that research we figured out that only in 10% of the cases people need stuff that is 24/7 on. So in 90% you can turn things off, you can scale things down, and if you do that, pay-per-use will be a much more better picture than when you don't do it. If you leave everything on, you pay a big price, and probably, and sometimes cloud will be more expensive. So be aware of the 10% and look for the 90% and try to automate the things you need to do in that 90%.
Now, how to get more insight on what the costs are. That is, for instance, on Azure, that is the cost modules you can use. That you give more insight how the cost structure is within Azure. You can also use the Azure Monitor, or you can use the Azure Advisor. That also gives you some more insight when your machines are too big or too small. And it comes again, if you're using this pay-per-use model and changing your machines, again, with what you already pointed out in the continuous change. So you monitor your machine, you learn for it, you change your machine according to the needs there are, and then you really pay for what you really use.
And then to add on the last slide, we still have, for instance, Azure Advisor, who gives you advice in what kind of machine. That is all about right sizing, and that is about snoozing, but we get back on that one. Number 8, the last one, that is about scalable. If you build solutions in the cloud, figure out how to pick the right server and how to scale the right server. There is a big relation in the previous one, but this is a really important one. So this is about right sizing the service. Herman?
Yeah. Now, very important, that is the principle what you normally did when you build an environment in your own data center. You put a machine in there that can handle the peak load. This is not the principle you should use when you move into the cloud. Then you pick a machine that is using the nominal load, because you can scale it when you need it.
Even a little bit behind the nominal load.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, if you're looking more at the right scaling, there's also something to look at. What is the generation of your CPU running in your own machine? And if you move that into the Azure, look at the generation that is running in the Azure machine. In most cases, is 100, 200, or 300% bigger. So even you can go slower on that one. But very important, if you're talking about scalability, is that there also are tools available within the platform to do auto-scaling. So certain things you don't even need to think about. So if you're talking, for instance, about scalability sets, where you can create how your platform can automatically scale up and automatically can scale down. Or there are solutions where you can use the Azure Monitor. Based on the Azure Monitor, again, based out of data coming out of the platform, you can trigger certain events, and based on those events, you can activate scripts, automation scripts. And the automation scripts can take care that certain machines can be turned off, or certain machines can be scaled off. There's all kinds of solutions already available to make sure that your platform can scale up and can scale down. That's very important. If we talk about scalability, it's not only about up, it's also about going down.
Okay, so far, these are the 8 principles we figured out are most come in handy when you do something with cloud. It keeps you on track. It reduces risk in moving in the wrong direction. And like said before, this is not a fixed set of principles. It's not a recipe. It's not a formula. This is more an art. And in that art, you can create your own picture, your own art. So add something to it. Delete something you don't need. But create your own principles to keep you on track. This is just an example, like I said. And those principles will distinct you from your competitors. It will show how you do things, what is important for you. So I hope this is useful for you, and that you can do something with these principles, and that it will help you on your journey to and in the cloud. And therefore, thank you for listening. We have one final thought?
One final thought. We just like to inspire you with these 8 principles. We've written down far more detailed information behind it. So you look at the URL on the left corner. There is a short URL where you can download the complete ebook we have written. It's completely free for you. Please use it as an inspiration and use continuous change. Pick your things you can use for yourself and adapt to it and change to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there are questions, other questions?
I have a question for you, and I will be here out of the just with sound, so you can stay at your spots. Yeah. I think it's a great overview that you gave, and I think it's also good to urge people to go to read the ebook. But how can people benefit the most? What should they do? Download the ebook, read it, and then what?
So I think what you do is you read the ebook. You try to understand the meaning behind the principles. And if you understand the principle and you understand what the principle means for you, and if you're a customer, you could use these principles and you could say, okay, I want to have a partner, I want to have an ISV, I want to have a cloud supplier who uses these kinds of principles so that I can trust them to move in the right direction, to do the right things when they grow and when they mature. So that is from a customer perspective. And from a partner perspective, it's the same kind of story. Look at these principles, figure out what these principles mean for you and how you can use them, make your own set of principles, align them with your purpose. So your purpose is why you are here, what you will do for your customers, what you will do for your colleagues, whatever. So align your purpose with your principles and just define a few and figure out if it works. And if it's not working, add some, delete some. Play with these principles. It is more about the concept of guiding principles than that these are the right one. We use these principles very often, basically all the time. These are the principles that work for us, but figure out your own.
Yeah, it also helps you to ask yourself the right questions. What do I need to about scalability? What I need about pay for use? What I need about trusted? Do I need the self-service part? And also the things, how you interpret these things on the Azure platform could be IP for you. In the end run, it could be ending up in a solution within the marketplace.
Yeah, and if you cannot answer the why behind these principles, think twice, because the why is the most important thing behind the principles.
Yeah. And then the second step after reading this ebook, and you are getting hunger in more how to do these things. Now there are several learning paths out there to go into details regarding scalability, regarding right sizing, regarding security, etc., etc. So you can go everywhere with this solution.
So see it as a starting point.
Yeah.
That's basically the answer. Other ones?
No, that was it. And thank you very much for the clear overview. I think it gave a good overview you gave a good overview for the viewers. A little bit different topic than the other topics that we had, but a very important one. If you want to bring your business to the cloud, you have to look at these principles to see how you can bring it to the cloud properly. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
We will be back again in 5 minutes with the last presentation of today. Ron Augustus will talk about everything, how customers benefited from bringing their businesses to the cloud and how their scaling journeys supported them. Very nice examples, and I think that brings all of the topics together, and it's a nice conclusion of the day. So thank you very much, Jan and Herman, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.